Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Sustainability, Infrastructure, and Development Committee to order. I will now call on Chris, the committee clerk, to conduct the roll call.
Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
We have regrets from Councillor Deutschman. Councillor Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hunick.
Present and accounted for.
Chair James.
Present.
We have regrets from Councillor Liggett. Councillor McCabe. Present. Councillor Novak. Councillor Salonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Here.
Councillor Williams.
Here.
And Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Chinantan, and Haudenosaunee people and recognize their enduring presence on this land. We honor the land, the water that sustains us, the air we breathe, and Mother Earth who provides for all living beings. As we move on these lands, may we do so with respect, recognizing the deep cultural and spiritual connections Indigenous people have had in this region. And let us commit to learning from Indigenous communities to protect the earth and to ensure our actions today support future generations. And just reflecting on what Clarence had said earlier and recognizing the passing of Murray St. Clair, the senator who was the chief commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And as I reflect, there was one of the questions he always made us think about and ask ourselves, where do I come from? Where am I going? And why am I here? It's just some time to reflect on that. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Okay, seeing none. Presentations. We have an award today with the University of Waterloo Cooperative and Experiential Education Employee Impact Award for impact on student engagement. So I am pleased to take a moment to recognize our regional staff for receiving the 2023 Employer Impact Awards for Student Experience from the University of Waterloo Cooperative and Experiential Education. The region's Waste Management Division was recognized for its significant impact on the University of Waterloo student community by providing stimulating work terms in positive, thriving environments and understanding the importance of skills development through experiential learning. The region's Waste Management Division has participated in the university's co-op program for over 20 years, hiring over 150 students. Many former students have continued to work for the waste management industry, including returning to work in the region's Waste Management Division. On behalf of Regional Council, I want to congratulate and thank our staff. I'd also like to thank the University of Waterloo Cooperative Experiential Education Team for this honor and for the opportunity to learn from and help develop the next generation of talent that will inspire and lead our community. I would now like to invite those behind this award to come forward and be acknowledged. Congratulations again. Can't speak highly enough of the experiential learning. It is so important for on-the-job training. Okay, next we will move to delegations. like to remind all delegations, for those joining us in person, please proceed to the podium when you're called to speak. Press the button there, make sure it turns green so that we know your microphone is on. And then for those, I don't know if there's anyone joining us virtually. One virtually, please leave your camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you're called upon to speak. You will have 5 minutes. Anyone who registered after the deadline will receive 3 minutes. If anyone conducts themselves in any inappropriate manners, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting, such as interrupting counselors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about counselors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and any hate speech or defamatory comments. Okay, with that, I would like to call on our first delegation, Stephanie Fritz. And you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, counselors. My name is Stephanie Fritz, and I am a Kitchener homeowner and a current master student at the University of Waterloo. I would like to voice my full support for the separated bike lane facilities that are proposed for Bridgeport, Erb, Caroline, University, and King Streets in Waterloo. The addition of these bike lanes has the potential to make positive changes for our community. Putting extra space between moving vehicles and pedestrians will make walking along these routes less stressful for people of all ages and abilities, as current sidewalks on these streets are often directly beside the roadway with no boulevard as a buffer. Fewer vehicle lanes to cross means less time that pedestrians and cyclists must spend in the street when crossing the road, which is especially helpful for people who move a little slower, like children and seniors. Shorter crossings are faster and safer crossings. With these bike lanes on Erb and Bridgeport, students attending Bluevale Collegiate will have a safe alternative option for getting to school, one that they absolutely need, as public transit coverage for the school is quite sparse. Personally, I have good friends who live on just the other side of the highway from the school, and their child will one day be attending Bluevale. I want him and children like him to have safe ways to get to school that don't rely on their parents driving them or them having to walk for a kilometer along an inhospitable, hot, high-speed road. In particular, Erb, Bridgeport, and Caroline streets often feel dangerous even for the people who are driving on them. These streets are 3 lanes across in most places and 4 lanes in some spots. These roads are so wide that drivers absolutely fly down them because it feels like they have the space to do so. Narrowing from 3 to 2 lanes can often be an effective traffic calming measure and still leaves plenty of road volume for vehicles. In fact, there are often cars parked along Erb and Bridgeport between Weber and Margaret, which effectively narrows those streets to 2 lanes every single day already. And even with just those 2 lanes available, those streets can handle the traffic throughput with little issue. I cross University Avenue at Seagram Drive on foot several times a week. It is frankly appalling that such a major corridor for students currently does not fully support their ability to bike safely to campus. The buses and trains going to and from the universities are always packed. We need to give the students in our city options to get themselves to school, to work, to the grocery store, to their friends' homes, and back again without the worry that they'll get clipped by a driver going 70 kilometers an hour in a 60. In a time when we are not only acknowledging that climate change is happening, but also experiencing the more severe storms it brings, we must be making room for transportation options that do not rely on burning fossil fuels. Walking and cycling are environmentally friendly ways to get around town that are good for our physical health, take cars off the road, and are also critical for building a sense of community and belonging in our neighborhoods. As the region hammers out the final details of the project, I also hope that you might consider a few more features that would improve safety and comfort for cyclists and pedestrians along these streets. Features like bike lanes that are wide enough for 2 people to bike side by side, whether they're friends or a parent with their child, or just one cyclist comfortably passing another who's moving a little slower. Raised continuous crosswalks and cross rides remind drivers that they must share the space, especially in the immediate area around schools, parks, and community buildings. Floating bus stops like the ones on Duke Street in Kitchener allow cyclists to easily continue on their journey, even when a bus is stopped for passengers without having to stray into vehicle lanes. And of course, planting trees along these routes will make the cycling and walking journeys less hot and more beautiful for everyone. Again, I am fully in support of the separated bike lane infrastructure that is being proposed today. Considering the frankly absurd blanket decisions that are being made at the provincial level right now with absolutely no consideration of what local residents need or want. It is more important than ever that we are vocal on behalf of the infrastructure and social improvements we want to see in our cities. I look forward to seeing the continued expansion, connectivity, and effectiveness of the bike lane system in Kitchener-Waterloo. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please remain for a minute. I've got some questions. Councillor McCabe?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you for addressing us today. It's really helpful, as always, to hear from residents from across the region on a variety of issues. And as a cyclist myself, I certainly appreciate your point of view. But I was wondering, and you don't have to divulge like financial details or anything like that, but a number of people have said to me that their support of bike lanes stems from part of the affordability piece. So just wondered if you could comment on that.
So personally, we went from a 2-car to a 1-car household about a year and a half ago. And part of that was absolutely the growing opportunities we have to use bikes to get around and get where we need without necessarily having to have a second car, which has absolutely been a financial savings for us. It wasn't spurred so much by the financial side. It's just kind of a nice little bonus side effect. But I mean, absolutely, especially when you're talking about students, they're barely making rent to start with. Having to afford a car on top of that is such a burden. If you can buy a $300 bike, get yourself around, it's an absolute win.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you're right. In a time when we talk a lot around this horseshoe and people in general, we hear a lot about the affordability challenges that a lot of people are facing. So I think anything we can do as a council to support people with that, and I think this is a clear way that supports people to have the opportunity to make those choices. So thank you very much again for your time today.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair James. You've partially answered the question I'm going to ask you, but one of the major criticisms of people that don't like separated bike lanes is that there's nobody using them. Can you just respond to that? I mean, clearly you went from a 2-car family to a 1-car family, so that shaped your behavior, but how do you refute those kind of criticisms?
I think that we're still very much at the beginning of this process. If you have 2 or 3 blocks of a separated bike lane, that's not going to a lot of places. It's not necessarily accessible to so many people, but as you continue to build the network and you make the connections so you can all of a sudden, bike 3 straight kilometers without having to stray into the road or bike on a sidewalk, that sort of thing, all of a sudden you have just opened up the doors. Obviously that doesn't happen overnight when you put in, a couple of blocks here, a couple of blocks there. It's going to take time, and you have to get people to change their behavior, but I think you have to show them that it's worth changing their behavior as well.
Thank you, and I remember being at the opening of, it was actually a multi-use trail, but it was going to the St. Jacob's Market, and it allowed people to go to doctor's appointments and grocery stores, and I think it's one of those, if you build it, they will come because they can get where they want to go, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Through the chair, thank you so much for your delegation today. I'm very proud of my net zero mobility device, and I'm very, very supportive of active transportation. So go you and go everyone else in the region. There was a thing that you mentioned in your delegation that I don't quite understand, and it was also in our report. So if you're not able to describe it to me, maybe Commissioner Spooner can. What is a floating bus stop, and what will it do?
Yes, okay, floating bus stop is, if you're familiar with the kind of, I guess, more recently rebuilt stretch of Duke Street between like Victoria and I guess Frederick, there's a couple of them in there, and what it is that the bus stop isn't like attached to the sidewalk. You have to cross over something to get to the bus stop. So there's a floating bus stop over by the city, I guess it's just right out the door here, the City Hall transit station where you have to actually cross over the tracks to get to the bus stop. There's also like a brand new one over by Water Street, and you have to cross over the bike lane to get to the bus stop. So what it does is it allows the bikes to go behind the bus stop as opposed to being sandwiched between the bus stop and where the bus is going to pull in. And then you basically erase the conflict between cyclists and transit movements.
I appreciate erasing the conflict between cyclists and transit. However, can we confirm that those are accessible for folks that use mobility devices?
Through you, Chair, yes. So these were first presented last year through the bus stop design guidelines,
Which I read, but probably didn't understand.
and very good description of removing the conflict of somebody stepping off a bus into an active bus lane. And yes, they are accessible in their design.
Thank you. We can proceed.
And one more, Councillor Craig.
Madam Chair, it's really a question of staff. Okay, so I'm prepared to wait for other speakers first.
Okay, when we get to that, absolutely. We'll mark that down, Chris. Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. Okay, I will now call on our next speaker or delegation. It's Ashley Cullen, School Travel Planner, Student Transportation Services of Waterloo Region. And you've got 5 minutes.
Okay, can everyone hear me? That's easy enough, thank you. Thank you, through you, Chair. My name is Ashley Cullen. I'm a school travel planner at Student Transportation Services of Waterloo Region. My colleague Leslie Maxwell unfortunately couldn't join me today. She sends her regrets as well as her full support for the following. The school travel planning team at Student Transportation Services supports the upgrade and expansion of the separated cycling network outlined in today's report because it will provide necessary protection for children and youth cyclists and further walking peers too. We've counted, and this year alone, there are 556 students impacted by this particular network. We know that access to quality cycling facilities, which on some streets does mean physical separation from motor vehicle traffic, is a key factor that influences whether or not more children and more people will cycle to destinations like work or school. This is especially true for children and youth. Cycling facilities that are designed for users of all ages and abilities, also known as AAA, are necessary if we want children and students of varying age, gender, and ethnicity to actually cycle and walk. Small children love being outdoors. They love walking, running, and biking with their friends. But when it comes to how they get to and from school, often children aren't the decision makers, their caregivers are. Convincing kids to bike is easy. Convincing kids biking is fun is easy. But before cycling can be a real option for kids, caregivers must see a route that is comfortable, safe, and reasonably direct to school. Many of our students do not have a route that is completely comfortable the whole way to school. This expanded network has and will continue to provide that for 556 children this year and many more in the years to come. 232 of those students this year are young girls and would benefit from increased security along the way. 18 of them are kindergarten students newly learning how to navigate the outside world and what it means to go to school. 23 are in grade 4 and have finally developed the capacity to judge gaps in traffic, so their caregivers are starting to let them go places on their own. And they're seeing their peers that live on less dangerous streets are allowed and have been allowed to walk to school on their own before. 77 are in grade 10 and will make this decision about whether or not to get a license this year. And again, as a reminder, this year alone, that's 556 students from seven different schools, that live near these cycling routes within reasonable distance of their school to use them. The bike can give these kids the freedom to earn graduated independence, to get an after-school job, to access volunteer opportunities that interest them the most, even if they're far away, to join a school team and be able to get home easily afterwards. This can even apply to students who are eligible for the school bus. These 556 students are the most directly impacted by these portions of the network for the school run. However, many other children will use them to get around their neighborhoods for many other reasons, and they will continue to use them as they grow into young adults. Protected lanes are not required on every street to be considered AAA facilities, but without physically separated lanes, cycling on these streets in this network would not be for all ages and abilities. Without these portions of protected cycling lanes, each new crop of students would have little freedom to choose active school travel. I know there is pushback from the province on streets like this, But are they thinking about the children who will no longer have access to the places they need to go after pulling out these lanes? At STSWR, we believe we have the responsibility to stand up for children's rights to independent mobility when we see that might be threatened. And sometimes that does have to happen one project at a time. We hope you'll stand up for them too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. I see no question. Oh, actually, no, hold on a second. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. I just, thank you through you, Chair. I appreciated Chair Redmond's question of the previous delegate, so I'm going to steal it and ask. Her question was around this notion that bike lanes aren't used. You know, you do a lot of work in this field as well. How do you respond to that, or what are your strategies for responding to criticisms that we continue to hear that bike lanes aren't used? And then I also just want to share that when when your colleague Leslie was in a couple of weeks ago, she talked about, you know, that making sure that cycling lanes and pedestrian walkways and trails are safe. It really also gives kids confidence and parents confidence that they can get there as well. And I think that's a really important point. It really stuck with me about it has to feel safe as well as be safe, so that people know that they can send their kids out at age 6, 7, 8, and know that they'll get to where they're going and back safely. So anyway, but just to Chair Redmond's question, wondered if you could comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned the confidence piece. It's really important for children and youth choosing active transportation, specifically cycling. Instilling confidence in them is really important. It's equally, if not to be honest, more important to instill that confidence in their parents, though, and in their families. You know, when we make decisions for ourselves about where we're going to bike, where we're going to walk, what types of facilities we're going to use, we're concerned about our own safety. We're concerned even more about the safety of our children. So being able to create these spaces where families feel comfortable biking with their children and introducing them to cycling in these areas, where we will start to see more children in those facilities, and that will kind of begin to serve as a justification for expanding these networks, is part of what we want to do.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think safe travel to school is very important. And I'm ancient, and when I grew up, we had to take a course before we were allowed to ride our bikes on the road. I'm aware that these, well, maybe you're older. Sorry. I'm aware that we've got a lot of different models for how we're creating cycling lanes. How are you, as a school board, teaching the children to be safe with, you know, where there's two-way on one side of the street, and how they watch for traffic, and how that all comes together? And just a heads up for staff, I'm going to ask you the same question when we get to the staff report.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm going to add real quickly that a few years ago in the region of Waterloo, there existed a local charity. I did have the pleasure of working with them, called Cycling into the Future, that provided that in-class cycling education to grade 5 and 6 students that included on-road training. Unfortunately, the charity has dissolved. However, my supervisor, Leslie Maxwell, as well as members of many of our area municipalities and both of our publicly funded Catholic and public school boards, are part of a project team to try to revitalize that program and reintroduce cycling education to students in our schools that includes on-road training, to revisit the success that we saw in that.
I think that's really important, because I think right now there's a lot of confusion with drivers and cyclists as to how you navigate all these new trails.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions. Thank you, Ashley. And we have joining us remotely Tom Strickland, I believe from Cycle Waterloo region. You have 5 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak to you today. I am a board member of Cycle WR, a cycling advocacy organization with members across the region. We strongly support the Separated Cycling Facility Extension Initiative. Cycle WR has completed a 3-year project to analyze the many potential cycling routes within the region. We developed a spreadsheet model to score the cycling routes, looking at general value, but also equity considerations. The model won the Wheels of Change Award from the Share the Road Cycling Coalition and the Local Climate Action Award from Sustainable Waterloo Region. Based on our model results, this proposal will build or upgrade cycling facilities on 5 of the top 10 priority route segments in the city of Waterloo. It's not hard to see why this is the case. University Avenue gives direct access to the 2 universities, 2 of the most important destinations in the region. The King Street upgrade will close a gap to create an all ages and abilities connection from Northfield Drive and the Conestoga Mall to Uptown Waterloo, and from there via the Iron Horse or Spur Line trails into Kitchener. From an equity perspective, the University and King Street sections serve a major student residence and low-income area surrounding the universities. Assuming the discussions with the Ministry of Transport are successfully concluded, the next step will be a new safe crossing of the Conestoga Parkway, the single worst impediment to a safe cycling network in Waterloo. The proposed cycling facilities are the gold standard for cycling, based on our 2022 Cycling Risk Survey. Off-road, fully separated from cars and pedestrians, with a full-height curb that does not allow cars to stop or park on the cycling facility. This will lead to far higher cyclist usage than we have today, reducing the number of car trips. Don't forget that a large percentage of the population are cyclists, pedestrians, and drivers. When we choose to walk, we will have the bike lane as a buffer between us and the cars, adding to our comfort and safety. When we choose to drive, our car speeds may be a little closer to the speed, which is a win for safety no matter what mode of travel a person chooses. The design is well thought out and has gone through a robust consultation process. We do have one question and one suggestion, however. The report says that because the City of Waterloo snow storage facility is at capacity, the cycling facility may be narrowed by 1 to 1.5 meters due to unremoved snow. Is this really the best we can do? Cars are far better equipped to handle hazardous conditions than bikes. Why should cycling facilities get the last priority in this situation? The proposal is to implement most of this plan by 2031, and presumably the 2 unbudgeted sections would come later. We know that every year, budget discussions result in multiple project deferrals. We suggest that projects with active transportation improvements like these should be given higher priority than road-only projects when cost-saving discussions occur. We would be remiss if we did not comment on Bill 212, the proposed new provincial bike lane law, in the context of this project. Car lanes will be removed to build these cycling facilities, and so if the law is enacted, the province could prevent the region from building any or all of these facilities. Given the minor impact on car travel times indicated in the report, that would be a horrible decision. We don't know if the province will listen to any reasonable arguments, but the fact that they are insisting on removing 3 major cycling routes in Toronto without even bothering to look at data is troubling to say the least. We think misguided is the kindest adjective we could use to describe this law. In this region, municipalities have been careful to avoid building cycling facilities where they will cause major traffic issues, maybe even too careful. In one clear example where serious traffic issues did arise, the temporary COVID bike lanes on Coronation Boulevard in Cambridge, which caused significant rush hour backups at the Delta intersection, the region reacted to citizen feedback and removed the cycling lanes months before they were planned for removal. There was no need for a bureaucratic and onerous provincial law. This initiative is a great example of a well-thought-out compromise among travel modes, with the potential for long-term reduction in car congestion as cycling trips replace car trips. This is the way it should work. Local councils making decisions based on local goals and local citizens' feedback. If Bill 212 does go into effect, we hope you will be pushing hard to require the use of objective data and reasonable criteria that comply with the basic philosophy of complete streets. Streets should be designed as the best compromise among the needs of the various travel modes, not just for our sole benefit when we choose to drive. From an equity perspective, streets should be safe and usable by all, not just those who can afford to own a car. Once again, we strongly support this initiative, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm seeing no questions from actually, no, hold on a second, Tom. Councillor McCabe?
Through you, Chair. Tom, just wanted to say thank you for your ongoing advocacy and your work on the Cycle WR. And I know you won an award, or the organization won an award from Sustainable Waterloo Region a few months ago. But yeah, just wanted to say thanks so much for your work and for coming in today and making those points. And certainly when it's time to ask staff questions, I'll pick up that question you asked and see what response staff have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair James. My question is equally for the delegation and for staff. I appreciate that you brought up both snow clearing of bike lanes as well as equity. Those are two really important things to me and many of the people that I represent. And so I'm just wondering, I am most tempted to use bike lanes in my mobility device when bike lanes are cleared of snow and sidewalks are not. So could you speak to, is it safe for mobility device users to be using bike lanes? Why or why not?
I certainly think they are allowed to go on bike lanes, and I think it's a good idea. It's a safe space for them. Snow clearance is an issue for both bikes and other mobility devices or anybody who's rolling.
Yeah.
It is less safe if there's snow there, potentially some ice. So the better clearance in the winter, obviously, the better. It is safer for everybody, and more people will use them if they're safer.
Great.
So,
thank you very much for thinking about weather conditions as well as equity as part of bike lanes. I think that's really insightful, and I really appreciate your perspective. And if staff want to take that question.
Councillor Hunick, I'm just going to have staff respond when we get to that report,
Awesome.
just to keep it concise.
Good, thanks.
Councillor Foxton. Okay, so hang on to that when we get to the report. Thank you, Tom, for coming in and for all the delegations speaking this morning about this. Seeing no further questions, we are going to move on with the agenda. The consent agenda. Is there someone to move the consent agenda item? Councillor Wolf and Councillor McCabe will second it. Okay, you'll be prompted in e-scribe. Were there any requests to remove it? No? No? Okay, all right, then you will be prompted to vote. Councillor Salonen, are you there? Okay, so that carries. We are now moving on to the regular agenda. So item 7.1.1 is the separated cycle network. I would like to call upon Cornell Mucci, Manager of Transportation Planning, to introduce the report.
Can I quickly introduce?
Commissioner Spooner is going to introduce as well. Before.
Yeah, thank you. Just before Cornell walks you through the presentation, a few quick thoughts. So upgrading and expanding our separated cycling network is going to help, as you've heard today, the safety and access for residents of the region, and also support Council's commitment to GHG reduction. I think we need to think about all of the road uses that come along with this. Pedestrians will have improved safety on sidewalks without competing with cyclists. Cyclist safety will obviously be improved through the separated curb and additional space, with the goal of all ages and all abilities access to those cycling lanes, which Council admittedly would include me. I'm not comfortable in mixed traffic on a bike. And finally, car travel and the movement of goods will not be significantly impacted by these changes. I think, Council, the recent provincial announcements may give you pause when a proposal like this comes along, but I'll remind you of a few things. There is no current legislation tabled or enacted that impacts this project. The next is that any future legislation will be reviewed and impacts to the projects assessed as required. Today, what you are approving is a network concept. The individual project approvals for each of these will come separately. And once we have more clarity from the province, we will partake in any provincial or ministerial approvals. My recommendation following Cornell's presentation is that the Region of Waterloo continue to support all resident travel, all road users, and encourage safe and reliable options for all modes. While my team, through our ongoing work and the development of the Integrated Mobility Plan, will ensure that the network performs well to support our growing region. We too have to be 1 million ready. Cornell, over to you.
Thank you, Doug. Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors. So this is kind of a conclusion of an almost 2-year-old study. And I'm actually happy to summarize what we have done. The first question is that why separating cyclists from traffic? We heard some of the delegations and we learned about that through research, through our observations. If we want to increase cycling from the 1 to 2% or 3% of the trips, then separated cycling is a requirement. And there's lots of research from Canada, from the States, from Europe, from other countries as well. So there is no question about it. In other places, we call it all ages and abilities. At other places, they call it 8 to 80 networks, which means that you are designing the network for kids and for the elderly. And if it works for them, then probably it will work for everyone else in between. So we are basically separating the cycling facility horizontally and vertically with a full height curb, so cars should never basically drive over that facility unless there is a driveway which is properly designed for that. And the first reason why we are doing it is safety. If you ask people that why don't you cycle or would you cycle more, they always bring up safety as the first and the most important reason. We are afraid to cycle in traffic, and there's a good reason to be afraid. I'm not saying that cycling in traffic is very dangerous, but it is perceived to be dangerous, and the statistic shows that there are more collisions if you are cycling in traffic compared if you are separated from motor vehicle traffic. And of course, that provides more options for travel. So today, typically we travel by car to most destinations, and that can change. Many other cities have built cycling networks, have a much, much higher cycling modal share. Many more trips are done by bicycling or walking as well. And this network supports other regional initiatives. For example, we had the shared neuron devices, e-bikes, e-scooters, and without these separated facilities, for example, e-scooters are often on the sidewalk, which is, they shouldn't be there, but they end up going there. With separated cycling facilities, they would be using those facilities as well. Plus, those with accessibility needs are also in a much better location on a separated cycling facility than sometimes on the sidewalk or on the road. And the smoothness of the surface is much better for those in wheelchairs as well. So this is not a new thing. I mean, we have been, the region has been working on policies for a quarter of a century. I mean, if you go back to documents from 1999, we are talking about multimodal transportation, and every transportation master plan, every official plan talks about the need for multimodal transportation. And the recent master plan also supports it, the 2018, the Growing with Care strategic plan. This council's strategic plan also points out the need for active transportation and multimodal transportation. The work is actually, it's not a very quick work. I mean, there's lots of planning, design involved with doing such a thing. We did the pilot cycling network, and the approval for that came in 2017. It was implemented just prior the pandemic. And that was basically the basis for this network. And you can see on the right side of that illustration there, the pilot network, which we learned two things from it. And that is that those streets which are very unfriendly for cycling can be turned into into cycling-friendly streets, because we saw from a very, very small number of cyclists doubling, or in some locations actually tripling and quadrupling the number of cyclists. On average, we had a 50% and 100% increase in the morning and afternoon period, but I mean, there were streets that had much higher increase. So that's what we try to basically make permanent and expand that network and make it better. The other thing what we learned from that was that maintenance of those temporary facilities are very expensive. So with this design that we are proposing, the maintenance costs would be lower. Can I see the next slide? This slide shows the network. I mean, there are many lines here. The report specifies exactly which streets and what sections we are talking about. We have King Street. We have a section which we are upgrading from the pilot and making it permanent. As I said, that's better for maintenance and aesthetically more pleasing and more comfortable, better design. And there is a section which is totally new, north from Columbia to Weber Street. To Weber Street, it is a new section. Also, we have University Street, we have an expansion part, and we also have an upgrade of the existing facility. Bridgeport and Caroline Street is totally new facility. And Herb Street has a short section today, and that would be upgraded and then extended with a new facility. Now you see that the dotted line around the interchange with Highway 85, that has been in the scope of the project. Now, why I kept it in a bubble there is the reason for that is that we have not resolved that problem or that section with Ministry of Transportation yet. We have been in discussion, we have a design for that, we didn't get their approval, so that's why it's not in this report in front of you. The cycling network connects to a number of other cycling facilities, so it's really a kind of a network thing. It connects to Weber Street, Columbia Street, the Laurel Trail, Iron Horse Trail, Spurline Trail, Margaret Street future cycling facilities, Lancaster, the future cycling facilities on Lancaster, and it also connects to a number of schools, universities, shopping malls, Waterloo Uptown. From Kitchener, you would be able to cycle to Waterloo Uptown, connects to the library, to parks. So it's really a network thing. It's not just one corridor. It is much, much bigger than that. Next slide, please. From the design perspective, I just have one slide, and it's a little bit technical slide, but what I want to show you is that this is the overall concept. And the default design is to have single directional cycling facilities on each side, which is simpler for cyclists and for motorists. But some of the corridors have two-directional cycling on one side of the road. And there are specific reasons why we have chosen that facility. And the reason for that, it requires less space and it has a better connectivity to the land use beside the cycling facility. But typically, we start with a single directional on each side. And unless there is a reason to do something different, then we do the different thing. You can see the full height curb between the vehicles and the cycling facility. You have seen in the past different designs in the region. We learned from it, we evolved, and we learned that the best design is a full height curb. We don't need the flex bollards, which are maintenance concern and cost. And there is a boulevard space between the cycle track and the traffic lane. The boulevard space is very important from the maintenance perspective. It is also good for the separation, the horizontal separation of vehicles and cyclists. Also, that will support the future automated waste collection, because that's where you would put the waste bins. And even with the manual collection, that's where the waste bins go, and they don't go on the sidewalk, they don't go on the cycle track. So there are and the facility or the utilities would go into that space, and sometimes trees if there is enough space there. And if there is space, sometimes if it's wide enough, then that could be some green space as well. From the accessibility perspective, you can see that we separated the cyclists from the pedestrians. That is important if you are visually impaired or you are in a wheelchair. Although for wheelchairs, there is opportunity to travel in the cycle track. The design between the cycle track and the sidewalk, here what I show is basically flush design, so it's the same level. But when we get to the detailed design, some corridors may have a little bit of height difference between the pedestrians and cyclists that is better for, there's always trade-offs, and if you have a height difference, then that's better from the visual impaired perspective, but it's not as good from the wheelchair user perspective. So we have to kind of balance and get feedback from the public that what is the best design for specific corridor. Next slide, please. This shows two street sections along King Street and Bridgeport, just to visually show approximately how would that look like. On the left-hand side, you have the existing setup with the temporary bike lanes with the we call pinned curbs and the flex post over it. And the other one is the raised cycling facility. You see the boulevard space, which varies. Here it's not, we didn't show a very wide section because at this section, this is King Street, at this specific location, there isn't much space. But there is a boulevard space, the cycle track, a strip to differentiate between the cycle track and the sidewalk, and then the sidewalk. The bottom slide shows Bridgeport Road, where we have 3 lanes today, traffic lanes, and that would be reduced to 2 lanes for vehicles. And on one side of the road, the 2-directional cycling facility, again raised with full curb and with all the same elements as I mentioned before, boulevard space and separation between pedestrians and cyclists. Next. This slide illustrates the Bridgeport Road Highway 85 interchange as is today. And the red circles on the left picture show the uncontrolled pedestrian crossings of the free-flowing, relatively high-speed ramps. And that is problematic, not just for cyclists, it is problematic for those who walk, and especially those who have accessibility needs. There is absolutely no accommodation of those with accessibility needs. There are no twizzes, those truncated domes to know that where the road starts. There is no pavement marking. Cars have absolute priority, and they are crossing that section at a relatively high speed. When I say relatively high speed, that is 50, 60 kilometers an hour in a conflict zone. So that is a problem that we identified, and the public told us about this. I mean, every public consultation, it was pointed out, and they were urging us, the public, to change that, to have that conversation with Minister of Transportation and try to find a better solution. Next slide. This is the design that we came up. What we suggest is to normalize the intersection. When I say normalize, that means that the free-flowing on and off ramps would be brought into an intersection at a 90-degree, and it would be signalized, so there is a right-of-way allocation by the signal, so pedestrians and cyclists would cross the road the same way as they cross any other intersection in the region where we provide the pedestrian crossings and signals. As I said, more work is required with MTO. We had some very good start with the conversation, but we did not manage to finalize that, and we still have to do some persuasion that this is a much better design. Of course, there are concerns that MTO has about the designs. I mean, they are not against necessarily cycling, but they have safety concerns, the impacts of the potential queues on the freeway line, and the level of service for vehicles that are making the turn on and off. So they have legitimate concerns, and that's where we have to find the best trade-off. Next. Cycling facilities need space. We cannot just create space from nowhere. Where we could, we did put the cycling facility in the boulevard space, or if we had the right-of-way, we put it there. But there are locations which are constrained, And there, the only alternative was to remove one travel lane for vehicles and convert it into the cycling space, and not just to the cycling space, but also to provide wider sidewalks, because lots of the sidewalks are substandard, 1.2 to 1.5 meters. Our standard is minimum 1.8 or 2 meters, typically. 1.5 meter is really the absolute minimum that we would do these days. So we provided us not just the cycling facilities, but the boulevard space as well for the snow storage, utilities, and the standard sidewalk widths. And to do that, we had to reduce the number of lanes on Bridgeport. We went from 4 lanes to 3 lanes with a center turn lane. On the other side of Highway 85, we went from 3 to 2 lanes. Erb Street, again, we went from 3 to 2 lanes. Caroline Street from 3 to 2 lanes. Actually, there are sections which are 4 lanes, but we reduced it to 3 or 2. King Street, also from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. So we did drop 1 traffic lane. Of course, every time when we do such a thing, we look at the impacts on motorists. I mean, most of us drive, most of the population, or most of the trips done by people is done by a car. So it is an important consideration. And we looked at the intersection analysis and the travel time analysis within these corridors. In some of the corridors, the travel time reduction was very minimum. Bridgeport and Erb Street had the highest increase in travel time. Erb Street, for example, 92 seconds, which means that from 6 minutes, the travel time goes up to 7.5 minutes, so 1.5 minutes on a 6-minute trip on average. The other corridors had relatively minor. Bridgeport also had about a minute increase from 6.5 to 7.5 minute increase in travel time. Now, these travel time increases, it's very difficult to these are averages. Very difficult to predict what will happen in the future. If we achieve the objectives that Transform WR has in terms of modal share and how we will travel in 10, 20 years, then actually the travel time increase will not be there, because that those plans assume or plan to change the modal shares, that there would be more people traveling by transit and also by active transportation. So this is really a plan for the future, that how do we see our region to evolve, and do we see the same percentage of people driving and cycling, walking, or we try to do it differently? And so all the plans are saying that we are trying to do it differently, so these travel time increases may not actually materialize. Next slide. Safety consideration, as I said, is the most important reason why we do these things. Without safety, we are not going to see any change in the attractiveness of active modes of transportation. It's not just for people on bicycles. It is also for pedestrians who are on the sidewalk and who will be further away from traffic. And the reduced curb-to-curb space for vehicles will help with the speed management. Currently, the operating speed is higher than the posted speed limit, and the best approach to manage speeds is by design. And lane widths and the number of lanes is a key factor of determining the speeds. Today, we have 10, 15 kilometers higher speeds, operating speeds, than what is posted. It would also help to reduce sidewalk cycling or e-scooter use on sidewalks. And intersections, we paid special attention to intersection designs. We are using the so-called Dutch design, or the protected intersection design. You have seen some of those intersections, or at least elements of those designs in the region already, and they are popping up all over Canada and North America. And next steps, we have to resolve the Highway 85 on-off ramp design with MTO, so we will be working with MTO colleagues. We also continue to work with the area municipalities on the maintenance issues. Typically, the municipalities or area municipalities are doing the maintenance, so it's very important that they support the design. There were also suggestions to look at sections of urban Bridgeport and convert them to two-directional traffic. We did quite a bit of analysis on that. That will also continue. We'll have some discussions. It's not very promising. I mean, that's the only thing I can say today, but there could be some short sections where we will have to look further. Then we will include the cycling projects in the long-term capital program and in the project approvals. And hopefully with that we will provide multimodal transportation to the residents of the region. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a few questions for staff regarding this report. So I'll start with Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, one of my questions was answered, and that was the provincial authorities and their new attitude about bike lanes. And I think that's been thoroughly answered. And I think we can also understand that they're really concentrating in Toronto, which is fine with me. The second one really deals with e-bikes on shared pathways, trails, and I'll give you as an example would be George Street, walking down George Street. It's designed for bikes, but you get e-bikes that are very heavy, traveling at 20 to 30 kilometers an hour, quite frankly, are dangerous. And are we aware of this, the extent? Have we had any concerns about it? Are we looking at any prohibitions about it? Now, that's an easy question, okay.
Okay, so this project is not about e-bikes. What we are trying to do in this project is to separate pedestrians from bicycles. So that is one of the things that we as a municipality can do. The legislation about e-bikes is we are still waiting for MTO to define what e-bikes are.
They're fast.
And it has been ongoing for the last 2 or 3 years. We provided lots of submissions, or actually I personally did, and I pointed out exactly the same things, that the e-bikes that currently are operating are too heavy and too fast. And what we were asking the province is to create a category which is the pedelec type e-bike, which is like bicycle, so it's not an electric motorcycle per se, and the speed limit should be very similar to the bicycle speed limit, 20 or 25 kilometers an hour. But so far, we have not heard back from the province, so it's kind of a gray area. And unfortunately, those heavy, fast e-bikes are proliferating on our network.
So it's on our radar. I guess that's what I'm to assume. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunig.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Cornell, for the thorough report. As has been alluded to around this table, I'm constantly wondering, am I a pedestrian or a cyclist? I don't really know. I'm somewhere in the middle. For the most part, I use sidewalks or multi-use trails, and I love them. The exception to that is when there's an obstacle in the sidewalk, such as snow or some other obstacle. And so I guess I'm looking for further assurance from you. In those circumstances, should it be safe for folks with mobility devices to resort to the bike lane?
If the bike lane is separated from traffic, like the designs that we propose, yes, okay. Those in wheelchairs should be safe in the cycle, we call it cycle tracks.
Thank you. And do we know if, for the most part, those in the cyclist community are amenable to that? Because I move slower, but not that slow.
Yes.
Cornell, I may be able.
Years ago, I did hear opposition from the cycling community for people in wheelchairs being in that space. Recently, I haven't heard that negativity from the cycling community, That it was a different city where I heard the negativity, but we did work with the cycling community to bring them on board. And I don't think that is a challenge, because they do appreciate that that space is not necessarily only for cyclists. It is for those who are basically those who are rolling. That's how we sometimes call those facilities, rolling and cycling.
So I don't know if that should eventually be an awareness campaign or a bylaw or none of the above, but I am thinking about those things and would welcome staff's input in that regard.
Commissioner Spooner, did you want to chime in here?
Yeah, just to add, through you, Chair. Councillor Hunick, mobility devices currently in the province are classified as pedestrians, despite the fact that you travel much faster than I do while moving. So I think Cornell's advice is the right one. If there is a sidewalk available that is free and clear of snow, that is the intended use. You, as I would, if there isn't an available sidewalk, we'll seek the next safest, which in this case would be a separated cycling facility. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Actually, Mr. Spooner, that's the opposite I heard from this staff when they first created the bike lanes. And at that time, I was on GRAC. I spent 2 terms of council on GRAC, so that's 8 years. And we were told that anybody in a wheelchair in a bike lane will be charged by the Traffic Act. So, and even if there is snow on the sidewalks, that's why GRAC has pushed so hard to make sure there's sidewalk clearing, because there's nowhere for them to go in winter. So we need that clarified, because I believe that it's under the Highway Traffic Act. And if we think that electric bikes are not going to use these and possibly abuse these, based on the speed they go, I think we're being foolish. And we need to say, have signs maybe saying, be respectful of all cyclists, including e-bikes, and make sure there's a campaign to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shantz.
Yes, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. Thanks for the thorough presentation. And the first one, I gave you a heads up that I was going to ask about training. With the what I find particularly unnerving as an automobile driver is the 2-way lanes on one side of the road. So I wonder, what are we doing to train drivers, to train cyclists on the safe way to use these different models of cycling that and lanes that we're starting to use?
Okay, so the design guidance and standards for cycling facilities are relatively new in Ontario. So if you go back 5 years ago, we didn't have so clear guidance. So the facilities that we designed were not necessarily the same from one street to another street. More recently, we have pretty firm and well-defined guidelines through Book 18, the newest update, and the Protected Intersection Guide, which is now becoming the handbook on designers' desks. So from that perspective, I think that we are fine. The training part, it will be much easier when the designs are going to be consistent at every location. The signage, what as a car driver you see when you are crossing a cycling facility, the so-called elephant feet, the square boxes, so they will send a clear signal that there is a cycling facility. The green paint that we used is a good thing, but we did not use it every location because it's relatively expensive, so we tried not to use at every single location, and it doesn't have a standing in design guidances. So the pavement markings that are there will help a lot to differentiate those streets where you have a cycling facility as you are making a turn. In terms of training, I mean, the only thing what we could do is just as a municipality, it is perhaps on our website to do some material. Otherwise, it is a provincial jurisdiction, under provincial jurisdiction to do the training of drivers.
So,
may I?
Please.
Yeah, I think I've been, Through you, Chair, Councillor Shantz, we don't have an answer about education and awareness today. I think when I'm thinking through the delegates today, and if we said we had an interest and we would explore, I think we could get the school boards interested. I know student transportation would be interested, and likely other partners. So I think that's a good, if I'll take that as a challenge to the team to kind of focus on education, I think that's a good place to go.
Thank you. If I could just add to that, I mean, when we started with the roundabouts, we did awareness campaigns, and I think this is something similar because it's fairly new and it's different, and frankly, it's dangerous. If I'm making a right-hand turn and there's a cycling lane and there's a cyclist who is coming up really quickly, it just feels dangerous. So I think there's a lot of awareness that needs to happen on both sides as to how we navigate this safely. And could I ask one more question? Just of clarification, I think I heard you say that some of the designs would have a step down from the sidewalk to the cycling lane. Can you just verify that? Did I hear that right?
So there's a separation between the pedestrian and the cycling space. What we have in our design currently is a flush design, so it's the same level. But the research and experience is coming in from about the designs. Different cities are doing different things. Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto are doing different things. Some have flush design, some have a height difference. So we are trying to learn from them and also learn from our experience. So when it comes to the detailed design of these facilities, that's when that decision will be made.
If I can just make an opinion and then I'll stop.
And then, okay, so we have quite a few.
And that is, I like the flush design. My concern is sidewalks, if you've got 3 people walking, for example, aren't quite wide enough. And if there's a little lip, it feels like a tripping hazard. So just an editorial.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I had a question on page 4 that I think got answered on page 9, but that was the slowing of traffic. And we all know that the perceived narrowing of a lane makes people travel slower. So I'm assuming that on page 9, when you talked about speeds being reduced, we have the data to support that?
To support that narrower lanes will result in slower speeds? Sorry, I didn't
that there are
understand
people on those current roads that are going faster than they would otherwise go, so that there are, hang on, let me get to page 9. Currently operating speed is 10 to 15 kilometers higher than the speed limit, so I'm assuming that we have the data to support that, so that narrowing these lanes, albeit for bike lanes and cyclists and pedestrians, will also have the impact of slowing traffic down, which is safer for everyone.
That's the experience, yes.
And there's another slide that talks about subject to MTO approval, and I think that's the slip lanes and getting rid of them. That's page 6 or 7. Who pays for that? Is that a cost-shared revision, or is that something that the region would bear?
We are not yet at that stage of discussion that who is paying for it. Typically, it's the region who pays for any changes of such magnitude.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair, and thank you for the for the presentation. And thanks for, we've had several conversations in advance of this, so I appreciate the time that you've put into this, because this project is really important in the city for some of the reasons that you mentioned, but I'd also just add, along the routes that we're talking about, particularly Bridgeport and Herb, there's also daycares there as well. And just for people who maybe aren't quite as aware of that area, it's also primarily a residential area. So it really is an area that very much warrants like better, improved pedestrian and cycling and rolling facilities, absolutely. So thank you for thank you for doing this. I think, personally, I'm really excited about this. The other thing that's really good about this is that it will better connect people on the east side of Waterloo through to our uptown core through when these safe cycling infrastructure and walking infrastructure is in place. So thank you very much for that. I'm just curious if you could, I have a number of questions, so I will go back in the queue. But I'm just curious about if you could tell us about the research that led to your recommendation of not making Bridgeport and Herb bi-directional, because they're both unidirectional right now.
It's a complex question. First, the Herb-Caroline intersection is a bottleneck intersection. So we try to look at various combinations of making Caroline or Herb Street two-directional, whether that would help with capacity for vehicles so that we could reduce the vehicular queues, because that was also an objective through this analysis. And so that is one of the challenges, and we figured out, or what the analysis shows, that we wouldn't get too much capacity gain, or actually there wouldn't be capacity gain at that intersection. The second thing what we looked at is that if we make Herb Street two-directional, how will people get to that Herb Street from the east side? Because we have some relatively small intersections like King Street and Herb Street, and by making it two-directional, we would lose vehicular capacities and the queues would be much longer. So from the vehicular perspective, this design that we have provides basically the shortest queues, although there are queues already there that will remain there. There is absolutely no way physically to remove those queues.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, it is unfortunate that Bridgeport and Herb, it's an unfortunate design that goes back years and years, but I appreciate you taking time to look into that because this is an important gateway, particularly Bridgeport, into the city, but and into uptown. But as I said, I appreciate you looking into that. Just on the Caroline and Herb Street intersection. I know you've said you've dropped it to one, or you've reduced it by one lane there. Is it possible, because I think the majority of cars are coming there and the majority are turning right to continue on Herb. Is it possible to reduce it by 2 lanes and then as you get close to the intersection, like have a through lane that's going to go straight on Caroline, and then like where it kind of splits, like so that we can gain a little bit more space there? Would the traffic flows be able to be managed that way?
Well, we did look at those alternatives. We tried to find the best balance between impacting traffic and what is required for the cycling facility. And at that location, we are not losing vehicular capacity at all. It is the way how the street is operating, it is queuing space. And it's instead of having a longer queue, we have a wider queue, queuing more lanes. But the capacity of that intersection is the same, and we did not want to decrease the capacity of that intersection because of the existing queues. The crossing for pedestrians on Caroline Street will be better with this design because we are removing 1 lane. So the crossing will be shorter. So I think everything is trade-off. We made it better for cycling, made it for pedestrians, and we did not make it worse for vehicles. And that was the approach.
Yeah, I appreciate the trade-offs that you have to consider. I would just, for personally in Waterloo, thinking of like going ahead into the future, because our main library branch is there and has a pretty significant size footprint. And we know that as a city, we're looking to redesign that in the coming years. So, and redesign it and better connect it to Waterloo Park. So I would just, as this work continues, I would just ask that you really continue to consider if there's a way to to further reduce the amount of vehicle lanes that are in front on Caroline as it swoops down, because there's just so much more opportunity we could do there from a city building and community building perspective if we had a little bit more space. But I'll pause there
Okay,
and
yes,
go
you're
back
at
in the
time,
queue.
Councillor McCabe, so we'll cue in if you need to come back again. Councillor Erb.
Thanks, Chair James, and thanks for the report and for the time that's taken with the public consultation. I think has been quite helpful. I'm glad in your report you talked about what these separated bike lanes are making it safer for the bikers, but also for people using sidewalks. I live around the corner of Erb and Fisher Hallman, and bike regularly to Uptown and have a bike lane coming from Fisher Hallman to Westmount. But then when I get to Westmount and want to get to Uptown Waterloo, I have to go on a sidewalk, and I've had many glaring eyes from people on the sidewalk reminding me that this is not for bikes. And I know that section of the road is slated, I think, for reconstruction in 2 years from now or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm happy to see that we're concerned as well about the safety of people that are using the sidewalks. I don't want to sound like a broken record and repeat what Councillor McCabe said, but you said that the possibility of two-way traffic on Erb and Bridgeport and Uptown Waterloo is not hopeful. I hope we could take the not out and keep it on the hopeful, but I understand the challenges of it. Some of us will remember that many years ago, the city of Kitchener moved, or I guess requested the region and successfully implemented that Duke Street and Charles Street would not be one way and would revert to two-way traffic. And I think it has made a significant difference in the downtown area of Kitchener in terms of traffic flow not as fast and development just looking better. I think the goal is to try and make our uptown and other cores as pedestrian friendly as possible. And for me, standing at the corner of King and Bridgeport or King and Erb and one-way traffic going past there, it feels like I'm at the intersection of the Don Valley Parkway and the 401 or at sometimes. And I just wish we could move that not hopeful to try and create a more pedestrian-friendly uptown Waterloo. And I understand that we might be a couple years late coming to the party with all the design that has taken place with the LRT. But again, I hope it can stay at least on the back burner for conversation and maybe to the front burner. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I may. Thank you for the question. I think, Councillor, maybe there's a bit of confusion in this report. We are recommending further study of bidirectional travel on Bridgeport and Erb. And additionally, as we move through detailed design of the specific projects, we will look at each intersection. So I think if it sounded less hopeful, I would say there is hope still. We'll have to do the study and just make sure that the network functions well with bidirectional, as well as some other changes which Cornell pointed out about intersections. So. Thank you.
We still have a few in the queue, but Councillor, were you prepared to move this motion?
I am.
Okay, perfect. And Councillor McCabe, you'll second it? Okay, so we'll continue with those in the queue. Councillor Harris, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just have a question of staff if they want to comment on, this plan as it relates to Bill 212. I know there's a question, I know our delegations earlier on mentioned it, lots of chat, in the community about this. So, obviously that hasn't been passed yet or sent, but how do you think the potential provisions within Bill 12 could impact this decision?
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Harris, for the question. So you'll note in the report that there are proposed lane reductions that do have what I would call minimal impacts on travel time, as Cornell rightly laid out. So if the bill is passed as it's been through its reading that we've been able to consider, these would be lanes that would require ministerial approval. So we would go through that process. We would suggest the impact being minimal on vehicle travel as well as the benefits of all ages, all abilities, but anticipate that these would be requiring of that approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor or Councillor Harris, did you have a follow-up, or are you good?
Nope, that's great. I got my
Perfect.
answer. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. You got to one of my questions. The other one actually was more so just a comment. Thank you to Commissioner Spooner as well as all of the staff, as I was in the Active Transit Committee when this was first presented to me, and Appendix C was really great to see how you guys took the comments and feedback from there, which for my colleagues, if you didn't have a chance to read over the appendix, it was overwhelmingly pretty supportive in that meeting. So just thank you very much for that appendices. It was really great to see the action and how it's moved since that meeting.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Councillor McCabe and Councillor Shantz, and then we're going to call the vote here after. Okay, go ahead, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. And just to the question, I appreciate your question, Councillor Harris, about Bill 212. But interestingly, at AMO, the city of Waterloo with some other municipalities talked to Minister Sakaria about a joint working group to deal with to come up with standardized design and that for those interchanges. And he, said, sure, no problem. And since then, and even as recently as yesterday, said, we received some additional contact from MTO to say, let's get these meetings rolling. So I take that as a hopeful sign that despite Bill 212, that there's still some work that they want to do, to address issues like that, to make cycling better. So I did have a similar comment and concern with that Councillor Shantz had about the height differential. And my question is, will GRAC be consulted on the design of that? Because I really worry about that lip that people will trip, fall, people who are fully able-bodied and with full eyesight and things like that. It just will, I think it'll make more problems for snow clearing, but it'll also make more problems, I think, for people tripping. So if GRAC could maybe be consulted in that, I know they've got a lot on their plate, but I think that would be helpful. So I'll leave that with you. And then my other question is, just with the peak travel time. So my first question is, how long do you consider the peak travel time? Is it an hour, or is it, how long do you measure that?
It's 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the
From
afternoon.
8 till 9 and what, 5 to 6?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
that's when peak travel time. Okay, and then I'm just curious if you think, and I know our region's growing, but because we're going to invest in these new fantastic improved facilities to get people walking more and cycling more and rolling more, do you think that, because the whole goal is to get people out of their vehicles, do you think there's that we would see potentially the times actually reduce, the peak travel times actually reduce as people embrace this, or is that I'm being far too hopeful?
That is the plan, and that's what's been happening in other cities where they invested a lot in separated cycling facilities and transit, because with the modal share, those who must drive, they will still drive, and that's fine. But the number of those people will percentage-wise decrease. Mm-hmm. And it all depends how consistent we are and how strong we are with these investments and changes in terms of active transportation and transit. There are lots of good examples from the world.
There's also good examples.
Good examples from other places in the world.
Okay, yeah. No, okay, and that is a goal, and as we continue to increase GRT, I got 2 more minutes here, Councillor.
48 seconds.
As we continue to make improvements in GRT and improvements in these kind of cycling facilities, I think, that is a goal that we should keep in mind, that every vehicle, people talk a lot about bike lanes reducing being impediments to vehicles, but everyone in a vehicle is traffic. So everyone we can get out of a vehicle helps to address what people perceive as congestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Doug, you want to?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Councillor McCabe, you make a fantastic point. As we grow towards 1 million people, we will run into a geometry problem. The geometry problem being an average motor vehicle gets 1.1 people in it. An average bus can get 40, a bike can get 1. different sizes. So that is the problem that we are faced with. If we do nothing, traffic will increase. If we can get creative and some of the innovative ideas like Cornell and his team bring forward and provide residents choice in how they travel, we have an opportunity to address this challenge before it becomes one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I just wanted to tag on to some of the other comments and say I appreciate staff considering ensuring that the automobile traffic still has space to move. Coming from out of town, for example, I came in Friday night for a meeting later in the evening, and I thought, okay, I'm going to come down King Street. Shouldn't be that bad. And I looked at, and it was very vibrant, lots of people. Slow traffic, I thought we're starting to look like Toronto. And so I just want to remind us that, yes, we need active transportation. There will still be people driving cars. And if you want to invite people from out of town into your city, you need to make it easy for us to get there. If you want to just be closed, that's one thing. But I think we really need to consider excuse me, what this region I think has done well over the last decades is create ways for people to connect with each other through the region. And we need to remember that. And so keeping that balance is important.
Thank you. I agree with that. We've done a very good job of connecting people from various areas. Commissioner Spooner, you wanted to just clarify something with Councillor Foxton and
Yeah, through you, Chair. So, Councillor Foxton, in a rare occurrence, we are both right here. Normally, it's you and not me. So legally, we are both right. The classification of mobility devices are as pedestrians. My suggestion to Councillor Hunick was, if the sidewalk is not available, use the next safest. You are right. There would be exposure to a potential ticket. I would hope that in the reasonableness of looking at the facility and snow removal, that wouldn't happen. But you're absolutely right. Mobility device users are classified as pedestrians.
So there's now these mini cars. Have you seen them? And they're classified as mobility vehicles. They take up the whole sidewalk. We have a couple in the township, and nobody can walk. No mothers with strollers. They all have to get out of the way. So we have to fix this, provincially as well, so that we have a clear classification. Maybe we need 3 lanes: a bike lane, a pedestrian lane, and another.
Sounds like there's some legislative policy work that needs to be done in other areas. Thank you so much to the team, Cornell and yourself, for speaking with council today and answering the very thorough questions that were provided. I think as a region and as people who are very supportive of active transportation, it is clear that there's intentional work being done, but definitely trying to shift behaviors, but also make it safe for everyone who's traveling on the roads and then the sidewalks and on the separated lanes and what have you. So with that, we'll call the vote here for this. Clerks will prompt that. Okay, so that is carried. We are now moving on to item 7.1.2, climate action update. I will call on Danielle DeFiels, Director of Regional Growth, Development and Sustainability, to introduce the staff presentation. Welcome, Danielle.
Good morning. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here today to introduce the report. The report in front of you essentially is a status update. It provides a snapshot of emerging directions on the development of a corporate action plan for climate change. It does build on the last update that we did in June of this year, and we anticipate coming back in 2025 with the fulsome plan to be in front of you. So before we get started, I do want to introduce my colleagues who will be providing the presentation today. We have Megan Eastwood, who's our Manager of Climate and Sustainability, as well as Caitlin Tozer, who is our Supervisor of Climate Transition and Sustainability. So I'll hand over the presentation to them.
Thank you, Danielle. With that context for our report and our presentation today, and I'll go to the next slide, please. We will begin by explaining the rationale for the development of the Corporate Climate Action Plan. We'll outline the scope of this initiative and the associated timelines. We'll then provide a summary of the process that we're following to identify a pathway to achieve our 2050 corporate greenhouse gas emissions target. And finally, we'll speak to the draft goals that will guide the plan, as well as the next steps for this work. Next slide, please. To begin, it's important to acknowledge that climate change is happening now, and it's happening faster than scientists predicted. This is a figure that we like to use to illustrate the different pathways the global community can choose to follow into the future. It's now clear that our actions have already committed us to a certain amount of warming. However, the choices we make now and over the next decade will be critical to determining the pathway that we follow. Under a 1.5 degrees Celsius warming scenario, in which substantial emissions cuts are made, we will still see approximately 46 million people displaced from sea level rise, water and food shortages, and significant loss of coral reefs. In contrast, a business-as-usual approach that ignores international calls to action and allows the climate to warm by 4 degrees Celsius will see between 470 and 760 million people displaced from sea level rise, severe food insecurity, and half of all plant and animal species facing extinction. So we're now tasked with choosing the future that we want for our local and global community. For this reason, the Corporate Climate Action Plan we are now developing will use an ambitious but attainable 2050 target that aligns with the aspirational goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is set out in the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. So I'll speak now to the rationale for the Corporate Climate Action Plan. As noted, the Paris Agreement marked a global commitment to meaningful climate action. By declaring a climate emergency and endorsing Transform WR, Regional Council has already demonstrated alignment with this global commitment. We know that municipalities play a critical role in addressing global climate change. For example, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities estimates that municipalities directly influence approximately 50% of the nation's greenhouse gas emissions. We also have an opportunity to demonstrate leadership that will encourage others to join us in taking bold action to dramatically reduce emissions. And finally, there's a business case to be made in investing in efforts to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. The impacts of climate change are expensive. 2024 has demonstrated just how expensive and frightening these impacts can be. For example, the Insurance Bureau of Canada notes that the summer of 2024 now ranks as the most destructive season in Canadian history for insured losses due to severe weather. In only 2 months, July and August, this summer has pushed the 2024 year-to-date tally to over $7.7 billion in insured losses. And while our research suggests there may be some premium costs associated with deep energy retrofits and new low-carbon technologies, the costs of inaction are much higher. The World Meteorological Organization estimates that the global cost of inaction is $1,266 trillion. This figure reflects the difference between losses under a business-as-usual scenario and those incurred with a 1.5 degree Celsius pathway. And this is likely to be a dramatic underestimate. More locally, the Financial Accountability Office of Ontario estimates that a proactive climate adaptation strategy for public infrastructure could save the province and municipalities approximately $1.1 billion annually versus a no adaptation strategy. So acting quickly and boldly to reduce our emissions and prepare for the impacts of climate change can ensure that these costs are mitigated. Next slide, please. So the Corporate Climate Action Plan that we're now developing will align with the transformative changes and actions set out in Transform WR, our Community Climate Mitigation Plan. As you likely know, Transform outlines the actions that all sectors must take to reach a target of 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. As we prepare this corporate climate action plan, we're identifying the steps the region must take to advance the implementation of Transform WR in the key areas that we exert significant influence, such as transit and waste. The plan will also be designed to complement and support both the strategic plan and the corporate energy plan. To guide this work, staff are using a target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions for all energy sources by 2050, which was established in 2022, and Caitlin will speak to that a little bit more later in the presentation. So this plan will include actions we can take between 2025 and 2030, and will then be updated every 5 years as we work towards our long-term 2050 climate mitigation goals. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the major milestones associated with this project. So we launched the project in the fall of 2023, and then we completed a scan of municipal best practice and climate mitigation in January of this year. We then conducted multiple workshops with staff to begin to identify the goals and associated actions that will guide our climate-focused work over the next 5 years. Informed by these workshops, we compiled an initial draft of the plan that is currently being reviewed by staff from across all departments. We've also initiated a modeling exercise that outlines the possible emissions pathways that we can follow given various levels of investment and action, and this is commonly referred to as a carbon budget exercise. And looking forward, we'll aim to finalize this modeling exercise and refine the draft plan before bringing this forward to Council in early 2025. So I'll now turn the presentation over to Caitlin.
I'll now expand on the process we've followed to develop a 2050 corporate target. We're facing unique challenges associated with reducing methane emissions from regional landfills. We have employed all available technologies to limit the release of methane from decomposing organic matter. Without significant advancement in technologies for methane detection and control, we will be severely constrained in our ability to reduce the source of emissions further. For this reason, the target will not apply directly to methane generated by landfills at this stage. However, as part of the design and implementation of the plan, we will still aim to address the source of emissions through enhanced diversion programs and innovative approaches to managing fugitive methane, such as through academic partnerships and exploring carbon offsets. So, given these constraints, it was previously established that all other energy-related emissions from fleet, transit, buildings, and operational processes must achieve net zero emissions by 2050. When identifying the actions to be included in the plan, staff recognized that some regional service areas may still emit emissions in 2050. In addition, the uncertainty around the impacts of rapid population growth on service provision and greenhouse gas emissions will need to be better understood through future decarbonization scenario modeling. So, to address these emissions reduction constraints, the use of high-quality carbon offsets will be explored. Carbon offsetting involves either reducing or removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere to compensate for emissions generated elsewhere. Next slide, please. We're certainly not starting from scratch. Rather, the actions that have been identified in the plan will build directly on the successful initiatives supported by Regional Council to date. Only a small handful of these are noted on this slide. For example, we have installed 15 rooftop solar projects generating a total of 1,200 megawatts. We have installed low-carbon thermal systems at library headquarters and Sunnyside supportive housing, and we are employing state-of-the-art cogeneration technology and wastewater treatment plants to capture and reuse greenhouse gas emissions associated with heating, cooling, reducing annual emissions by approximately 1,900 tons. Next slide, please. Although many important steps have been taken, there is much more that needs to be done. To help us understand what is needed to reach our goals, we are conducting a modeling exercise that outlines potential emissions pathways to our 2050 target. This exercise considers the transformational changes we can make across the organization by retrofitting or replacing assets that produce emissions. A simple illustration of the preliminary modeling results is shown on the screen. The line shown in red indicates a business-as-usual pathway that the region will follow if no further efforts are made to decarbonize operations. The decarbonization scenario, shown in blue, illustrates a pathway towards net zero is possible, but anticipated growth delays to preparing the organization to adopt new technology, such as preparing buildings with the electrical capacity to support EV charging stations, means that emissions may increase over the next 5 years. So, in recognition of the magnitude of change needed to reach our 2050 target, staff are preparing to use a phased approach to the delivery of corporate climate change mitigation initiatives. Phase 1 will involve strengthening our foundation, where the corporation will create net zero standards and policies for new asset procurement and retrofit, and establish a climate data system to ensure transparency and progress reporting between 2025 and 2030. Phase 2 will see rapid decarbonization, where the region will take actions necessary to accelerate a rapid decline in emissions from regional services and infrastructure. And Phase 3 will involve offsetting our remaining emissions. During this phase, the corporation will offset emissions that cannot be fully eliminated by purchasing high-quality carbon credits that result in the permanent removal of carbon from the atmosphere. This preliminary modeling will be further refined over the next several months as we identify the actions and investment needed to dramatically reduce our emissions. Next slide, please. The draft plan will be organized around the themes presented on the screen. The themes and associated long-term goals shown on this slide have been prepared through significant consultation with staff from all departments. The goals are as follows. For buildings, we will achieve net zero energy emissions in region-owned facilities by 2050. For waste, water, and wastewater, we will mitigate the release of fugitive methane and adopt innovative approaches to reduce operational emissions. For fleet, GRT, and transportation, we will procure only low-carbon fleet and transit vehicles by 2050 and invest in infrastructure, programs, and services that support a community modal shift. And for capacity building, we will continue to build climate change action into the decision-making fabric of the region. We are now in the process of identifying and refining actions needed over the next 5 years to progress toward each of these ambitious goals. These actions will be presented in the final draft for your consideration. Next slide, please. I will finish by outlining next steps. First, we will complete the emissions scenario modeling exercise that will inform how we will reach our goals. We will conduct additional internal engagement on the draft plan to ensure that the wealth of expertise held by staff is integrated into this plan. We will then present the final draft plan to Regional Council with a request of endorsement in early 2025. We will continue the work underway to develop a financial strategy that will inform future budget planning. However, the timing of this work will be influenced by staff capacity. Part of this work will include further refining high-level estimates of the cost to reach our net zero energy target. We will present these refined estimates together with the draft plan. And finally, we will work with our colleagues to embed climate actions into work plans. Thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Don't go anywhere. And just a reminder, this is a report for information. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Excellent report, but we have to remember, we had Kevin Thomason come and criticize the township that you're not going to meet your 2031 or the 2050 target. And this region has been told the same thing. And it's not because of what we haven't done, but if you listen to the news, it's because of the wildfires. So that doesn't mean we stop doing. In fact, we keep doing. But the smoke has caused such a barrier in our atmosphere that it has created more greenhouse gas emissions. And we have to realize that, and that doesn't stop us from going forward. And I commend the action plan. We did have to cut back on the transit buses that were electric because of the cost, but we've got a good hybrid method to go with, and I think that's good. And we do have to keep moving forward, but remember, we're fighting climate change. We're fighting what happened with the wildfires. We're fighting with God knows what else is going to happen next. but that doesn't change what we do. Isn't it ironic that when COVID happened, our world started to heal? It's very interesting how that happened and how quickly it happened. I think a lot of environmentalists were shocked. But I just wanted to state that we cannot, if we don't make targets, as long as we've given it our all, that's all that we can do.
Thank you, Sue. And for one, I'll take this weather all year that we have today. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you very much. Through you to the trio in front of us who put this together. Really appreciate the work. And I know the staff at the City of Waterloo who work with you regularly wanted me to convey that how much they value the relationship and the work that you do collectively. So thank you for that. Just a couple of questions that I have around the carbon budget. Can you give us an update on where you are with that? And because I think that's one of the sort of fundamental, like a foundational piece that will actually really help, staff, the community, and council really understand how we're making decisions and how those decisions we're making, impact, impact our GHG emissions.
Through the chair to Councillor McCabe, thank you for your support and your team's support and the question. You are correct. The carbon budget is one of the key inputs into the development of the Corporate Climate Action Plan. And I'll turn it over to Megan, who will maybe provide a brief explanation of what a carbon budget is and how it will influence the plan itself.
Thanks, Danielle, through the chair. So the preliminary emissions pathway modeling that you saw on one of the slides really forms the foundation for carbon budgeting and the reporting framework that we hope to build. So this will be introduced in 2025 as part of the 2026 budget planning process. And we will be using a phased approach to implementing this, and this will allow for integration with our existing accounting and reporting processes, and will also align with those 3 phases that you saw Caitlin speak to in one of the slides. So recognizing that carbon budgets are still a relatively new concept, we're still sort of iterating and learning as we go. We've been in close contact with the City of Edmonton, City of Calgary, and the City of Toronto, all of whom have started down this path. So we're learning quickly from them. What we hope to bring forward is a qualitative framework to start that allows council and staff to evaluate the emissions impacts of their various initiatives and projects. And as our data becomes more robust and our accounting becomes integrated into everything we do, this will move to a more quantitative tool. So we are well established in terms of that initial baseline work that we showed in the earlier slide, but we'll be moving into qualitative then a quantitative framework in the very near future.
Okay, thank you for that. I think it's really important. As I said, I think it's really foundational. I just want to challenge a little bit some of the language that's in the report that that talks about that that things may become more expensive because we want to make maybe different decisions that would more dramatically reduce our GHG emissions. But if you flip that, and one of you mentioned use the word it's expensive when things fail. So I think the more we really think about, what are the costs of not acting and what are the costs of not adapting our infrastructure, like that's where the huge expense is. So I just would like us to kind of think about that language a little bit, maybe differently or carefully, with all due respect, because there's the opportunity costs or the cost avoidance. That's really what we're trying to get at. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, or I just see you talking to each other.
We certainly agree, and I think to your point, the cost of inaction is what we are most concerned about, and that is a much more costly pathway than the cost of ambitious, proactive action that we take now.
Yeah, it's really, being it's penny wise or pound foolish, I think. I do have a couple other questions, but I'll go back in the queue.
Okay, Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, and Councillor Hunick would also like to be added onto the end of mine here. Thank you for the presentation. This is a very complex topic with so many pieces to it, but I do have a somewhat specific question, and it's regarding the use of methane from the waste from the landfill. And you said we can't mitigate that. you alluded to, I think you did, using the methane. And so I wonder if you can expand on that a little bit. How can we plan to use the methane that's generated from the landfill to offset some of the other pieces that there are? And also the graph, the pie chart that showed waste at 52%. Do I understand that as being 52% of all of our GHG emissions are coming from the landfill? So I think if we can't mitigate that, it behooves us to use it.
Through the chair, I'll speak first to your second question, if I may, about the pie chart. You are correct. So that is representing our total corporate greenhouse gas emissions as of 2022. So that is landfill-associated methane. And I know the team is using all available technology, but Commissioner Rose can speak to more on that topic.
Thank you, Megan. Through the chair, as the landfills are decomposing, they create methane. So as time goes on, less and less methane is actually created through the decomposition of waste. And we're pulling as much methane out of the landfills as we can right now with the current technology. There is something called fugitive methane, which is the stuff that comes up from the surface, and we're at the limit of the technology that we can use to capture that methane. The methane we do capture is used as electricity in Cambridge for the industries that are right beside the landfill, and in Waterloo, it's used by Tormont to provide electricity to, I think it's 6,000 homes. So we are using as much of the methane as we can and capturing as much as we can at this time.
So, excuse me, just for clarity then, even with us capturing that, there is still 52% of our greenhouse gases is coming from the landfill?
Through the chair, that is correct, yes.
Okay, if I can just add one comment on that, then if we're saying we're not in a position to mitigate it at this point, please don't stop measuring it or reporting it.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hunick.
Thank you. Thank you for this report and the major strategies outlined in it. I'm just wondering if there are any more low-hanging fruits, smaller initiatives that are perhaps not noted in this report that we could still utilize in addition to what you're doing. And for example, what I mean by that, last winter or the winter before, I received an email from a constituent who was quite concerned that there was a construction project going on at the airport and the lights were being left on 24/7. I realize that there are different reasons why we would leave the lights on, but I wonder if you want to speak more to those smaller strategies that do make a difference and like demonstrate to the community what our values are.
So through the chair to Councillor Hunick, with respect to construction, there is, I'm not sure I'd call them low-hanging fruit, but we are in the process of working with other municipalities on green infrastructure standards so that we can start using those in our construction projects. We do have some information already from the City of Toronto, which my design and construction team is looking at to see if we can incorporate some of that into the work that we do. We do, just to let council know as well, like from a facilities perspective, we every time we do renovation, we put a replacement in that is low carbon. So we don't do like for like. If there's an opportunity for us to put a different technology in that's low carbon, then we will do that. And that, I think, is the low-hanging fruit that we're, regularly working on. And that is actually the case in all of the waste management and water and wastewater infrastructure projects as well.
That's excellent to hear, Commissioner Rose, and I didn't mean any disrespect with the term low-hanging fruit. If we could promote not only the larger initiatives that we're doing in the community, which are awesome, but also the smaller things like making sure that we have green infrastructure standards, that's really cool. Thanks.
No disrespect taken.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. I was curious about the carbon offset piece in there. And again, when I talked to the staff at the City of Waterloo, what they had said to me is that their idea, their preference, at least right now with what they know, is that it would be better, similar to the Green Development Standards, if we had we found commonality across all the 8 municipalities. So I'm just wondering what your perspective is on that, or what stage the work is on that.
Through the chair. So very preliminary at this stage. We are aware that there is a lot of variation in terms of quality of carbon offsets and credits. So we would want to make sure that we pursued something that was locally based, so that anything that we are purchasing is implemented here within the region. To your point specifically, I think a great opportunity would be to work with our Climate Action WR colleagues for a uniform approach. I think that makes it fair and easier to track. So I think we would take that back as a great suggestion as we move forward with this. If Council choose to endorse the Corporate Climate Action Plan, that would be an initial first step, is to develop that offsetting strategy together with our municipal partners.
Okay, that's great to hear. And speaking of partners, my last question then is, how do you propose, through this plan, how do you think that community partners, particularly Sustainable Waterloo Region and Reap Green Solutions, what part do you see them playing in this?
So through the chair, they play a really essential role in driving down community emissions. So with respect to REAP, they really focus on residential energy retrofits. That is something that we will complement if we are able to secure federal funding in the delivery of a home energy retrofit program. So we're working together with them on that. SWR really pushes our business community with providing them resources and tools to also engage in climate mitigation. So very complementary. They, I think, are tackling areas that we don't have as much direct influence. So I think it's sort of an all-hands-on-deck approach, and through the Climate Action WR Collaborative, we can ensure that everything is done in a complementary, not competing manner.
Right. Okay. I think they sound like they're really important and valuable partners. And I'd be prepared to move this, or sorry, this is for information. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
I've got a couple more in the queue, and then we're going to move along to the next, since this is for information. And any further questions, maybe loop back to staff on this regarding the work being done. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't know really how to, I'm just going to go ahead and say this, but piggybacking on Councillor Hunitz. So as you know, Regional Council has been late some nights, very late. So I take the 401 home, and it's black on the 401. They have no light, except at one facility at the corner of Homer Watson and the 401. And it's lit up like, it's unbelievable how it's lit up. And this is before it was even operational. And I wonder if we can talk to someone there about maybe using less lights, like scaling back some of them, because it is unbelievable. You're driving in complete darkness, and then there's this huge amount of lights, which is a huge waste of energy. Maybe, I don't know who would talk to them. Do you want me to go talk to them?
I think that's the city of Cambridge, but I think there's, that is that distribution center. So very valid point. Okay, Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, Chair James. I'm still pondering this pie chart, and it's really bothering me. With waste sitting at 52%, fleets at 6%, and we're spending a lot of budget money to make, to try to get our fleet costs down. And so I appreciate that you've done your due diligence, and I'm not questioning your conclusions, but I guess I'm just as we continue into budget, that's really weighing on me that we're spending a lot of time and energy on our fleet when 52% of our emissions are from the landfill. So I don't know if you have any further comments on that, but just a comment.
Through the chair, and perhaps I'll offer a response first, and then Commissioner Rose may want to jump in. So in terms of staff's efforts in reducing those methane emissions, that is ongoing. By no means do we want to imply that by removing them from the modeling, are they not taking every step possible. They're involved in some really innovative academic partnerships to find new ways to both detect methane, fugitive methane, but also reduce it. So that will be a key component of the proposed corporate action plan, is how do we drive down those methane emissions. We just know in terms of the available technologies, we're sort of at our limit, which is why we sort of set them aside temporarily from that very preliminary modeling exercise you've shown there. I would also add that every bit counts. So if we are just temporarily sort of at our limit for what we can do for methane, all the more reason to really drive down emissions in the other areas that we can exert some control.
Thank you. Okay, we are now moving along to item 7.1.3. I will note that we will have to have a hard stop in about half an hour, so we will get through as much as we can, and we may have to break and then come back after. So next is the Kissing Bridge Trailway. I will call upon Commissioner Jennifer Rose to introduce the report. And this is a recommendation, so we will need a mover and a seconder for this.
Thank you, Chair James. This report provides an update on our work to build a bridge over the river for the G2G trail. We are continuing to wait for the province to provide permission to build the trail. So this is what I had spoken about last month. I'd like to highlight in this report the financial section, which shows that the funding for the bridge would come from debt and could range from $500,000 to $4.5 million, depending on if we get the grant funding. One of the recommendations is that staff would come back to council for direction if the funding for the grant is not approved. The debt will put pressure on the operating budget for transportation, as the repayment for the debt will come out of the transportation budget, and this will ultimately impact future tax levies. This may impact also the ability to do further work on the transportation capital plan. To avoid further impact on the transportation capital plan, a contract FTE is requested to manage this project for the duration of the project. This would include financial oversight, project schedule oversight, as we need to ensure the completion of the project by the deadline, grant reporting, because all grants require us to report back, completion of an EA. We are using a consultant to do this work. Also, there's ongoing Indigenous nations consultation and managing multiple interest holders. So I just wanted to highlight that piece for council, and I am here as well as Director Kosa to talk about or to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner Rose. Chair Redmond.
That was actually a cue for Councillor Hunick.
It's a good thing I have friends, because I don't have a computer that works. Thank you, Councillor, the Chair James. Commissioner Rose, I really like the price tag of $500,000. I really don't like the price tag of $4,500,000. And so I'm wondering if our approval of this can be contingent upon receiving a certain amount of grant funding, or if that just mucks everything up. Help me.
No, it doesn't mess anything up. So through the chair to the councillor, one of our recommendations is that if we do not get the grant funding, that we come back to council for further direction in what we should be doing with this project.
Oh, perfect. Maybe that's why it was in my head. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Noack.
Is just a quick question. Is my request to speak thing working? It's not.
It's showing up here. I have it.
Oh,
so you're next.
It
yeah.
tells me it's telling me to update it here.
Okay.
I don't know why. Okay, just a few things. I want to move this motion to when the time is right, but I have a few comments in advance. Certainly pleased to see, that staff has moved forward with the program. I think at one point in time it was sort of put in the back bush, so to speak. Just got some interesting numbers today with the amount of use that this trail has been having. 600,000 users use that trail annually, and that was in 2023. Of that 600,000, 250 were what they call unique visitors, first-time visitors to the trail. So I think that speaks to the potential that this trail has and the need for the trail, the tourist option in that. Understanding that there's a lot of hurdles to overcome before we get to this point. Yet I do have a question a couple questions actually, if I may, and I want to refer back to the original motion that set this made this go forward, and that motion was, whereas significant structural engineering and environmental approval work has already been completed for this project by engineers and environmental consultants qualified to practice in the province of Ontario that should be used to guide detailed design work and project approval rather than duplicating this work. And that was followed up by that staff consider utilizing external consultants or a short-term contract position to manage this project rather than an additional full-time employee. So the question is, could this engineering firm or any engineering firm be considered to manage this project as opposed to hiring an FTE? Would it not save some time, mitigate the risk of being late for the provincial funding? I just find it hard to understand why we would have to go to hire a full-time employee to manage this one project. Maybe staff could answer.
Frank, do you want to respond? Thanks.
Sure, through you, Chair James. I'll break that down into a couple of components. In terms of just running with the current design that's been prepared, while we certainly have faith in the consultants that have prepared that design, we have a regulatory requirement to follow the EA process, which would involve taking a look at several options for the bridge and then evaluating those options, presenting those to the public, and taking forward a recommendation to council to prior to proceeding with detailed design. So that's just something we need to do as a municipal organization. In terms of hiring a consultant to complete both the EA work and the detailed design, yes, that's certainly something we plan on doing. That's something we do on many of our projects. That doesn't mean we don't need someone here to guide the project. We still need someone to coordinate public consultation, to coordinate engagement with other stakeholders, Indigenous engagement, bringing reports forward, and basically leading the project from the region's perspective. So it's not an either or, it's an and.
Okay. So once the bridge hopefully is up, you're still going to have a full-time person on salary at that point?
Respond.
So through the chair to Councillor Nowak, that recommendation, I need to change it. I was just thinking when Councillor Hunick said she'd like to change her own motion, but we can amend it to add contract to that, because this would be somebody we would hire just for the length of this contract.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just missed that.
So section F, approve a new FTE in design and construction, that should be for under contract. So a contract position, not a full-time. So that's what's being asked to be changed.
So that helps. Thank you.
That helps?
Can I
Okay.
keep going or not?
keep going. You've got, well, you're a little over, so I might ask you to queue back in because we do have a few more.
Okay, well, why don't, I'll come back.
Okay, all right. Next, Councilor Verbanovic.
Thanks very much, Chair James, and thank you to Mayor Nowak for asking the question. In fact, I had already, I was going to ask a similar question and forward it to the clerk, an amendment that I was going to propose, which reflects the wording that Commissioner Rose just proposed. So I don't know if we need an amendment since it's already been moved, or if it's being moved with the revised wording. I think the only other point that I would make, as council knows, we're in the midst of budget deliberations, and one of the things that we've asked for additional information on is the possibility of making some changes to the capital budget, which could actually assist us with operating costs. And so while I recognize there may not be capacity in the current workload as it's proposed for 2025, 2026, that could change depending on the decisions we make in the coming weeks on the budget. So, Commissioner Rose, if in fact we do have additional internal capacity based on future decisions that might be made in the coming weeks, would the intent then be to utilize existing staff and not have a need to hire an external contract?
So through the chair to Councillor Verbanovic, certainly we can look at that if that is the case. Staff typically continue to work on design or EA work, even if a project is deferred, just in preparation for the shovel-ready projects where we get grants from the government. So that is something that we could pause in order to do this project. I think that the reason we have this report coming now as well is the grant application process started recently. I think it was August 2024, and we want to be able to apply for that grant before the grant runs out of money. But yes, we can, if we can make room through the budget process on a new FT, or not needing to get a contract FT, then that is definitely a possibility.
Okay, so that's great to hear, and I want to be clear. I'm very supportive. I want to compliment Mayor Nowak for the work that his township has done on this, for the private sector or community contributions that have been brought into this particular issue to try to help make it happen, and I will support it. And if there is a need for an amendment, Madam Clerk, or Madam Chair rather, I've already sent wording to the clerk for that prior to speaking, and I'm prepared to move that amendment.
Okay, just to clarify, clerks have updated the original amendment to read, and I'm going to have this on the screen. Just want to make sure that Councillor Nowak is okay with it, and if you're satisfied with the wording, Councillor Verbanovic. So Section F says, approve a new FTE in design and construction for a project manager contract position to lead this project and avoid the need for deferrals of other projects within the Transportation Capital Program. I have not seen your amendment, Councillor Verbanovic, but are you, and Councillor Nowak, are you okay?
Yeah, so, Chair James, that it's consistent with that. I mean, I think just to be clear, we're talking a 2-year contract position, correct?
Yeah.
So maybe just put that in there, and then as Commissioner Rose indicated, depending on the decisions that we make at budget time, that may not be necessary, and they could potentially use existing staff.
Okay, so this will be amended to specifically say a 2-year contract position. As per the other component, Councillor Verbanovic, that will come up during the budget process. So staff can update based on how we go through our budget process.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and you will second this, Councilor Banovic? Good. And Councilor Nowak, are you okay to move it, or is there
I
more?
just wanted to get some clarification on something before I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So to hire the contract person, how soon would that happen? I mean, would it be wise to hold off on that until the funding is secured? Or would that happen immediately?
So through the chair to Councillor Nowak, we have someone right now who's just come on board in the design and construction team who hasn't been fully allocated to other projects, who's running with this project at the moment. So should we get the funding from the province and to go forward with this project, then our design and construction team would look to hire the 2-year contract position.
So once the funding is in place, so that's, so I don't know if that has to be in the motion or not. Probably not. That's direction to council or direction to staff.
Direction to staff, and then this is what we'd move on. However, we do have a couple more people in the queue, but for the record, Councillor Nowak, you've moved it. Councillor Banovic, you've seconded it. Okay, and then next on deck here, I don't see my list anymore. Councillor Erb.
Thank you. I have a question. I just want to be clear on the EA is proceeding now. And how are we funded? Where is that being funded from?
Through the chair to Councillor Erb, we are going to be funding that EA from the funding that's provided by the township once we get the agreement in place. So we will what's the word I'm looking for? We will recover those costs from the township and put them towards the project that they're currently coming from.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Wolf, and then we will vote on this.
Through you, Madam Chair. Many of my questions have been answered. I just wanted to, in consideration of the budget, if we do not get the grant, can we defer this project?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, you can defer the project. We would have funding from the township for the EA. I'm not sure it would cover the entire EA. We'd have to look into that. However, EAs are good for 10 years. So once the EA is done, the construction of the bridge could happen at a later time within that 10-year period without an EA having to be redone.
And if that, would the EA require the contract position?
Yes, it would, but for a shorter period of time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have this recommendation on the floor. It has been amended to reflect the 2-year contract position. Clerks will prompt you all in e-scribe in a moment. That's because it's my committee. And that carries. Again, thank you to staff in the township and those who have donated. Truly a collaborative approach to, building this bridge, redesigning it. Okay. All right, okay, we are moving on to item 7.2.1. We may be starting the discussion and have to come back to it. That is the Regional Road Assembly, Oxford Road 5 between Regional Road 1 and Oxford Road 8. I'm going to call on Acting Commissioner Spooner to introduce this. And this is a recommendation, so there will be needed, we will need a mover and a seconder.
Thank you, Chair James. So rightly noted, the recommendation today is that the region approve the commencement of the process to transfer the Township of Wilmot's portion of Oxford Road 5, and noting in the report there's actually 3 segments outlined to the region. Noting that this was previously approved by Wilmot Council in December of 23, and it was advanced to Regional Council through a motion by Councillor Salonen and deferred, and now I believe today we're ready to address it. The reason for this one is these 3 road segments meet the region's current road assumption policy from a connectivity and also in terms of improving the network. And second, because we're good partners here. When I say we, I mean the region and our area municipal partners, in this case, Wilmot. So Wilmot was a partner in the intersection project I'll provide more detail on shortly, brought regional staff in to support and advise, and we've been working together to make the road assumption and the intersection project work with the associated funding and fit that all together. Council, these road assumption reports are fairly standard. As we work together with our area municipal partners, we recognize changes in the road network that require a transfer of road authority. We have a policy that sets some standards for that in terms of function and condition, and also seeks for the transfer to be fair and reciprocal. We all serve the same taxpayer, and as we learned last week from Ipsos Reid, it doesn't matter who owns the road. What matters is that it's safe and efficient for our residents. There is one irregularity in this project in that the region is taking on half of Wilmot's share of the Punky Doodles intersection project. This project is shared with the counties of Oxford and Perth and has a third cost-sharing agreement with a total cost of that project of between $1 and $1.2 million. As the timing for Wilmot and the region didn't really work on this one, we agreed that the region would cost share the safety project, getting the road ready for upload and then executing the upload. So what we're seeking in this report is an upset limit of $200,000, which will cover half of Wilmot's contribution to the broader project, with Wilmot covering the other half. Final project costs are still being confirmed, but we have sufficient budget to cover this. So I think there's a recommendation and also a motion following Chair James, and happy for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much to Commissioner Spooner for working with the Wilmot Township staff on this and for all of the staff that were involved in getting us to this point. I just wanted to clarify, because I know a few of my colleagues have been asking, my motion that's coming forward after, I will be removing it pending the vote on this motion brought forward. I'm satisfied with the information that staff have brought forward, and really hope that you guys can support in the organization going forward in this direction. So thanks again to staff, and just wanted to clear that up for anyone who is wondering.
Excellent. Councillor Salonen, would you like to move this?
Yes, I'm happy to move this.
Okay, and I need a seconder. Councillor McCabe, okay. I don't see any further questions, so we will call the vote on this. Councillor Williams, are you there? Are you in favor of the motion? Yeah, just mark her out. Okay, so that carries. Thank you, staff, township, all of those. This was probably about a year ago this time this came forward or so. So good to see the progress. All right, moving along. 8.1, council tracking list has been circulated. Other business, Councillor Salanen's motion has been removed. I do have a few things for staff. I see Councillor Foxton. Councillor Foxton, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, through you. Again, the tracking list, just a lot of items are due in the fall. So I just wanted to bring a heads up to staff, no pressure. Well, maybe a little.
Okay, noted. We'll get updated. All right. A couple of things. If Commissioner Spooner, one of the things is the GO station. There's been some work done there. If you could provide an update about that.
Yeah, through you, Chair, and thank you for the question. Just quickly, when we talk about GO Rail service, I always like to talk about the exciting things on the horizon. So our continued advocacy for two-way all-day GO service on the Kitchener line, our recent acquisition of lands for the future Breslau GO station, and the Kitchener Central Transit Hub, which we will have an update for Council pretty soon. Finally, on the existing Kitchener GO station, so we've recently completed upgrades to the lower parking lot. And a reminder, the upper parking lot is not regionally owned and operated. So the project on the lower lot removed some potholes and really smoothed over the lot. Next, we've also added a walking path from the corner of Victoria and Weber to the platform. You'll remember this as the Desire line that was carved into the grass. It's now a paved pathway. We've got some finishing touches to do on that one, adding a railing and some lines. But hopefully residents are noticing that the Kitchener GO station has some improvements for both the parking area and pedestrian access.
Okay, thank you. Another question was around any updates around Herb and Ira Needles, that roundabout there. There's been, I think, some ongoing discussions about any sort of pedestrian safety measures.
Yeah, through you, Chair, and again, thank you for the question. It's important to first say that my team and I believe overall that roundabouts are safe in Waterloo region, and we believe this because the data tells us that there's a 2 times as likely potential for collision at a signalized intersection as there is at a roundabout. But as we've discussed before, roundabouts don't always feel safe. And they don't feel safe because we don't have the same protections that we have at signalized intersection. The red light and the walking person give us a sense of ownership of space. But again, they are safer than our signalized intersections. This doesn't mean that we can't look at ways to make them safer. And we've talked a little bit about the Roundabout Pedestrian Safety Pilot Project in 2025, and I think it's the right time to talk a bit more about that. We're looking at that pilot at 2 separate interventions. The first is a raised pedestrian crossing, and the second are flashing lights and beacons at those pedestrian crossings. So really trying to give that sense and also notification to vehicles that people are moving through those intersections. The roundabout at Urban Ira Needles will be part of this pilot project due to recent incidents and actually over the last 5 years. This is a location needing of our attention. Also separate from the safety pilot, we're also looking at lighting at the Ira Needles and Herb intersection. So we'll be evaluating the current lighting levels to ensure that they prioritize safety, and if an intervention is needed, we will make that intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Spooner. So lighting, so the pilot project with lighting, flashing lights, and then what was the other part of that?
Raised crossings.
Raised crossing. Okay, thank you for that. I know there's been quite a bit of emails coming in around that intersection.
Yeah, through you, Chair. That is planned to start in early 2025, so as soon as we can get into the ground. Yep.
Perfect. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Spooner. What a great job. You know, when you do roundabouts, as all of us know, you look to your left. And that's why I think where some of the problem comes, because you're no longer trained to look both ways. You're trained to look to your left. And brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay, I want to give advance notice to council that this is another impact of Commissioner Spooner's area. I'll be bringing forward a motion regarding lifetime veterinarian bus passes on the next council meeting, so November 20th. Veterans. How did I say veterinarians? Oh, no. Vets, the veterans. So yes, November 20th, motion regarding lifetime transportation for veterans. Okay, is there any other business? Oh, Councillor Craig.
If I may, I wanted to make a short announcement, but I'll do it if you got anything else, just at the end, if I may.
At the end of this committee or at the end of?
Well, right
yeah,
now.
Yeah,
Can
do
I
it
do
now.
it now?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
No, I just want to bring my colleagues up to date about a small hamlet, Dixville Notch in New Hampshire. And they started voting at midnight. And they've announced their results for the presidential election. It's a 3-3 tie.
Oh my, 3-3?
3-3. Doesn't mean anything, just a 3-3 tie.
Oh my goodness. You're okay. All right. Give us an update at the end of ANF. Okay. The next Sustainability Infrastructure and Development Committee is December 3rd. I will now look for a motion to go into close. We will break for half an hour for lunch and then we'll go into our closed. Councillor Wolf and Councillor Foxton. Okay, and we are moving into closed, receiving information related to labor relations regarding Ontario Municipal Employee Retirement System. And receiving information regarding employee negotiations related to union matters, receiving information regarding a proposed or pending acquisition of land in Wilmot Township, providing direction to staff and related instructions to be applied to negotiations on behalf of the region regarding a proposed or pending acquisition of land in Wilmot Township, and receiving information regarding pending or potential litigation. It's already carried. Okay, we're good. So now I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn this meeting. Councillor Foxton, Councillor McCabe. You'll be prompted in e-scribe in 5 seconds. Yes, okay. We're adjourned.